I'm Stuart Zechman, and I've heard something that really disturbs me. I've heard lately that the Republican Party is now populated with wild extremists, right-wing lunatics who are completely divorced from reality. And so, like never before in American history, the GOP is now totally unreasonable and insane. And if they get into power in Washington, they will enact the most dreadful, terrible, awful policy ever. Have you been hearing this lately too? See, I remember way back in the late 90s when Congressman Dan Burton, a Republican from Indiana, was so frickin' nuts that he actually staged a supposed reenactment of how Hillary Clinton murdered a White House staffer named Vince Foster by shooting a pumpkin in his backyard and telling reporters to imagine that this was Foster's head. Dan Burton, I swear to you, once proclaimed in a 1995 House hearing on the war on drugs that the U.S. military should, quote, place an aircraft carrier off the coast of Bolivia and crop dust the coca fields, unquote. It was later pointed out to him that A, Bolivia is landlocked and has no coast. B, the Bolivian coca fields are beyond the reach of any carrier-borne crop duster being separated from the nearest coastline by the 20,000-foot-high peaks of the Andes, and C, F-18s can't crop dust. The Republicans from the 1990s were like this. They literally told people that Bill Clinton was Satan. These guys made today's war on religious freedom hucksters look like college Democrats. They make Romney's references to Obama as a European-style socialist look like an endorsement. And then they were so suicide bomber insane that they actually impeached a sitting president over a blowjob. You think that the debt ceiling debate was Republicans at their craziest? I'm telling you, back in the 1990s, they stopped the whole government, held a trial in which the now very serious Lindsey Graham got up on the floor to carefully consider the nature of semen stains. This was the Republican Party of the 1990s, totally effing crazy. Their policy agenda, the policy proposals that came out of conservative think tanks like Heritage Foundation and American Enterprise Institute, was even worse for America than all the phony investigations and fake scandals and even the blowjob impeachment. These guys, the Republicans, actually proposed things like turning Medicare into a premium support system and, get this, creating this vast privatized health insurance scheme where, state by state, the private health insurance monopolies would sell people junk insurance that they were forced by law to buy in a special private market. They would all be funded through HHS, so the federal government would end up actually paying insurance companies to stay in business, and means tested, so only the deserving poor would get any help. And this regime would somehow make healthcare affordable care. Crazy, isn't it? So, when I was reading the New York Times the other day, and I saw Paul Krugman say, quote, how did American conservatism end up so detached from, indeed, at odds with facts and rationality? For it was not always thus. After all, that health reform Mr. Romney wants us to forget followed a blueprint originally laid out at the Heritage Foundation. The truth, of course, is that he was not a severely conservative governor. His signature achievement was a health reform identical in all important respects to the national reform signed into law by President Obama 4 years later, and in a rational political world, his campaign would be centered on that achievement. Unquote. And I thought, Krugman is openly declaring that Heritage Foundation healthcare policy, the policy that flowed from these same insane pumpkin-shooting Republicans in the 1990s, is an achievement. The argument in elite Democratic circles seems to be that the scary Republicans are scarier than ever before, so scary that they somehow make the Republicans of the late 1990s look reasonable. So reasonable, in fact, that conservative Republican policies from the late 1990s, policies that are completely at odds with the philosophy of the New Deal, a functioning government, a federal state that doesn't spy on anybody it feels like, and a free and fair market for everybody, policies that reject everything that movement liberals stand for, are now considered to be achievements when enacted into law by today's centrist Democrats. Now, if you think about this, that is itself quite detached from, indeed at odds with, facts and rationality, and it was not always thus. But it does seem to be the argument that national Democrats are using to win over people like Dr. Krugman. How could it be that the passage of policy in all important respects identical to conservative think tank Heritage Foundation's policy we movement liberals would have recognized in 1998 as an obviously deeply unpopular non-solution, the product of bankrupt ideological premises regarding the superiority of markets, certain to bring tragic consequences to the people of our country and discredit to the party which promoted it? How could this ever be rationally called an achievement? It can't be. Not unless one jumps through extraordinary intellectual hoops to rationalize voting for a Democratic politician whose own signature achievement is Mitt Romney's healthcare policy. And that's what this line is about, folks. We movement liberals are being told from on high that the reason why centrist Democrats' failures are actually achievements is because the Republicans of today are so scary. And that's just not true. The movement conservatives are just as frighteningly wrong today as when Ann Coulter became a millionaire writing a book entitled Godless about liberals, and when Ramesh Ponnuru wrote The Party of Death about Democrats. So when you hear this line, it's pretty likely that you're going to read Dem-leaning pundits in the Washington Post consider how reasonable Newt Gingrich's old agenda actually is compared to the new Newt Gingrich's agenda. And then ask yourself, what did FDR say about fear itself? I'm Stuart Zechman, and this has been the Z-Files.